not one for content warnings, but this one's kind of necessary. If you clicked on this video, I'm assuming you're an adult, and you can reason that this conversation will involve sexual content in nature. I'm not making my guests use words like corn or grape. YouTube can just grow the fuck up and go shove something up its digital ass. I also want to put my bias on the table before I even record the panel. There's this weird thing happening on the internet, something that I kind of assume is part of our current inability to divorce ourselves from our opinions, something I have dubbed smut shaming. Probably not an entirely original term. Essentially, you've got people who will give you grief if you read anything with any form of penetration on page, and you've also got the crowd who only reads that kind of stuff and will call you a prude for reading something else. And both mentalities just seem weird to me. I don't really understand judging someone for what they read, even if it's not my cup of tea. And this isn't just some fringe thing happening over on TikTok. There are whole videos devoted to this very topic. So I want to explore the topic just a smidge more. So in the interest of bridging this gap, I've invited on some romance authors, some who write extraordinarily spicy things, and some who write nothing more than a sweet kiss. Let's see if we can start building a bridge for this gap. Please make sure to add your own thoughts down below as we go. But first, let me give you a couple examples of what I mean by smut shaming.
But the important factor to note here is this. When it comes to women's arousal, they need far more specific things than men do. So a woman's sexual entertainment taste will always be 1,000 times more specific than a man's. So when a woman seeks out a new book, she'll look for specific cocktails of tropes for that thing she needs to feed her specific hungers. Or, I guess, thirsts. A quick perusal of the book recommendation section of the romance books subreddit will destroy any remaining illusions you might have had that these books are about anything other than sexual arousal. Just take a moment and look at some of these. Can you honestly say that this attitude towards women's fiction has to do with anything other than sex? I spent a little time while I was researching this subject talking to women and reading the accounts of women who were struggling with the addiction to hardcore content. A solid 90 to 95% of them started with erotic fiction, or smut, as they often called it, and fan fiction. A few stated that they didn't really ever get into videos, often because videos couldn't feed their precise needs. Several mentioned that they had quit the video content only to fall back on erotic fiction, and had happily arrived at the realization that there was functionally no difference between the two. I read an account from one woman who noted that she preferred written smut because within books and fan fiction she was able to find things that would have been illegal in video form. So that's nice.
These people enjoy romantasy, a genre in which the most popular stuff is very, very pro-patriarchal, designed for cishet women with a patriarchy kink, who enjoy the bondage perpetuated against women by men who are already the powerful ones in a patriarchal system. That is comfortable for them. They know their place and they find it hot. This book subverts that, asks us to consider it, and also shows us a much healthier, more experimental and broader approach to sex. And all of that makes the romantasy girlies uncomfortable. Even down to having interesting sex. That makes them uncomfortable. And that is hilarious.
Well, I define smut as basically porn. It's the smutty fiction where it kind of spells it out for you.
I basically read a book last night, Writing Romance Fiction for Love and Money from the 80s, which spelled out how to write in the romance genre back in the 80s, and how wrong this woman was in trying to predict how the market would go. But even the way they were defining smut versus spice versus whatever, there was this pussyfooting around the idea that was smut and spice the same thing? How far could you take it before it kind of went into erotica? And it kind of got to the point of well, that's the problem. Is penetrative sex always going to be smut and erotica? Or can it be literary? And in the 80s, they decided that it could be literary, and maybe that's where most of these problems come from. So it's hard because you read all this and you go, it's not patriarchal or anything. Women really do like really, really interesting sex. But
there is a difference between erotica and romance and literary, despite how much sex is in it, there is a difference.
I think there's a difference between smut and spice, to be honest. I think smut is highly defined in some books, and spice is more not exactly that graphic. I like to think of my books as spicy but not smutty. Like, I'm not reading word for word every detail that's happening in the bedroom. Spice is more a little bit in there, but not necessarily spelling it out for you.
I think that's what smut and spice used to be. It used to be like smut is a little more explicit, spice is just the more euphemistic. But when you start to learn about the progression of how the romance industry, the commercialized one at least, was progressing, you start to see where lines are starting to get blurred and where they pushed the envelope and then kept insisting that it was still literary when it was obviously more pornographic and erotic. I think we can all define smut and spice. We've separated it. I just don't think the publishers have or care anymore.
I'm so new to this genre, to writing in general. I wrote my book for my wife. We actually had a discussion about this topic over the last few weeks, and she and I are both just more conservative, I guess. You can talk about stuff without being explicit. The audience that I'm going after is people who, they want a good romance, they want a good story, but a love that's lasting, a love that's based on something true, not based on just pure sex. Every writer is going to have their own audience.
It's hard because everybody who uses the word smut is using it differently. If they're using it as an insult or just like a joke, or if they're using it like as an inter-community term, there's like not really a definition. I guess you could just say in general, sex in a book. And then spice would be kind of like the titillating aspects, whether it's sex or not. And then that's kind of where like the chili pepper rating system would come in that people give books. But personally, I like to just rather go by the genre marketing definitions, where it's like, and then just kind of categorize it like, is there sex in the book? Is this an erotica? Is this a romance book with, spice, how spicy, that kind of thing.
It's kind of interesting to see how people, when they are looking to put down this topic, will kind of almost hone in on something.
Well, I watched the video of the Willow person, and while I didn't agree with everything, I don't think that she was saying that every romance was like that, was conservative or was patriarchal.
So I do think part of the problem with all the more kinky stuff that we see in this is the 50 Shades of Grey effect. And I wouldn't say that's patriarchal or religious. I think that was just a really badly written kink book, but it sold 100 million something copies. I forgot what the exact number is. And it got movies and it got everything. So of course the publishers looked at that as like, well, I guess everyone just wants kink in their stories these days. So it may not even be that deep. It might just be one of those things where it was so shocking that people read these books, and then the publisher saw that and went, oh, we must add this to the stories to sell books. And I'd be curious to see if the newer stuff actually sells as well. Well, I do know some of it doesn't. So I don't think it actually does sell. I think it's one of those things where we had this shock value and then we had diminishing returns, but people act like this says something about women and what they read today and yada, 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 instead of just the publishers thought it would make them money.
It strikes me the different approaches that both of those content creators took. One took a very logical, very researched, very methodical approach, which appealed to me and my conservative values. And the other one was all emotion and all trigger words. I literally couldn't get through more than listening to like 3 minutes of that. So I think the difference between smut and spice, if I were to take those two approaches, is I would say spice is more of a conservative approach to romance, and smut, and it appears as though Willow and those types of folks are actually proud of the controversialness of smut.
The first lady lends the facade of having researched and going deeper and all this stuff and knowledge, but it's basic. She doesn't know anything. She's gone to a place, found some people that have done this, and decided that this is the norm. It's kind of almost comical, but it's also sad, like, for her to spread this stuff. But that's kind of part of the conservative playbook. I use big words, and therefore you are, wrong, and blah blah blah.
Oh, I didn't see you there. What am I reading, you ask? Well, just one of the best-selling books on Amazon right now. With millions of sales and almost 20,000 5-star reviews, this book has been absolutely blowing up, especially on TikTok, or BookTok, as the kids call it. Thousands and thousands of women, in particular, have been raving about this piece of literature. What piece of literature is it, you may ask? Well, Morning Glory Milking Farm, of course. A popular romance novel about a young woman down on her luck who does what every young woman does when facing financial struggle. She starts an OnlyFans. No, I'm just kidding. She wouldn't degrade herself like that. She gets a job jerking off monsters.
Did you know that there's an entire subculture around this? I don't mean like a subreddit or a Discord server. I mean a serious capital C culture, which you would never know by the epithet they themselves have adopted. They're not just people memeing on the internet. They're not just horny fans of a fictional character. No, they're monster fuckers. That is what they call themselves. Part of the reason I feel really compelled to talk about this is because it's not really a niche thing anymore. It has entered fully into the popular consciousness. You may have noticed that the monster romance genre is having a bit of a moment right now. You'll find steamy paperbacks about monsters in your local bookstores right there on display out in the open. Robert Eggers' Nosferatu and Guillermo del Toro's The Shape of Water are big-budget cinematic masterpieces that feature monster fucking as a major plot point. That hear me out trend where people compare their weirdest fictional crushes blew up last year. You might remember all the cakes. And unlike most online fads, it's still going strong. I'm making this sound like it's all some new thing. It's not, of course. If you look, you'll see it goes back a very, very long time. Demon lovers, seductive sirens, Beauty and the Beast. Monster fucking is just as popular and just as ubiquitous as the monsters themselves. For every person who finds one scary, there's another who finds it very much the opposite.
I've done a lot of classes and research into fairy tales, and especially the history of fairy tales, the motifs and the themes and whatever. The problem with the Beauty and the Beast one is that Beauty and the Beast is specifically not a monster fucker story. It is actually taming the beast and taming the beast in the man to make him human, so you can have a healthy, happy relationship with your partner. Whereas the witches is the demonic mating with the beast because you are evil, etc. Not passing judgment, obviously, but that's what that was. You are a witch because you mated with an animal. It's even in the Bible. It's the one specific line about fornication and problematic relationships that relate specifically to women is, it says, women, you're not allowed to lay down with the beast. So this goes back all the way to antiquity, and in almost all cultures in antiquity, it was either a ritualistic thing or considered terrible and something you don't do. In the fairy tales, though, it's always about the beast that is within man and changing them into a human. So same with Princess and the Frog. No, she is not fucking the frog, okay? We've entered into different territory in the modern age. That's all.
I have to agree. I think that the premise below that is a lot less than what they're making it out to be. It's a love story. You don't have to have the smut for it to be a love story, for a romance. I mean, it's totally skewed. They missed the point, in other words.
I think these videos they're trying to be controversial, right? They're trying to make you blush. They're trying to make you think outside of what you would normally think of. Of course, like Beauty and the Beast, I watched that with my daughter, like when she was 7. I think that they're taking it way out of context.
I kind of agree with that. I think that a lot of these videos looking at a lot of those things from a modern lens, and especially looking at it from the way that people are looking at them now. But yeah, of course, there's always going to be like people that look at things in the darker side and romanticize it. These things aren't totally new, obviously. I mean, if you look back at, like even in like the 50s or whatever, there was like, like Vampira and everything, like romanticizing it. But looking at it as like, that's what it was meant to be is a very, very modern interpretation for sure.
See, having read the first chapter or two on the sample of the Minotaur one, and then reading the samples of her other books, I don't actually think the Minotaur one is about monster. I mean, it is fetishistic in a way, but when you compare it to like the kinky books, it's not actually all that kinky necessarily. It's just this being is monstrous, but it's more weirdly akin to Beauty and the Beast, but where he doesn't actually turn into a human. And I say that because her future ones, she got popular off of this, but her later works, the monsters and it's just not even remotely the same. It's a lot worse. But I think why it blew up has more to do with the Beauty and the Beast, like wanting that to tame the beast, to tame the man, whereas the other ones, well, let's just say those monsters are not men. They're not monsters either. They're those samples were horrible. But I do think the Minotaur thing isn't really about monster sex. I think it's more complicated than that, and why women latched onto it is more complicated than that.
I read the whole damn book because I didn't want to be that person that judges a book by its cover. The writing was not my thing. It wasn't. Absolutely not. Yeah, there's no way I can say this without being blunt. I have never read so many overly detailed hand jobs in my damn life. And I am quite confident I never want to again. That was graphic level of detail on where she sticks her pinky, and I did not need that, thank you.
Hey y'all, just a 5-second intermission to remind you that these videos are sponsored by me and my Vampire Buddy Cop mystery series. So if you enjoy all these different interviews and finding new authors you've probably never heard of, please make sure you're not only hitting the subscribe and the like button, but going over to ehdrake.com to check out free chapters and audiobook samples of my Vampire Buddy Cop mystery series. This is what keeps the channel going and helps me find you all these new interviews. Now back to the episode.
I'm sorry, but the romance itself was sweet. It's the fact that it's like 90% of their page time is sexual in nature, as in when the couple is on page, it's almost all sexual. That was the part that made me just like, I'm not comfortable. I'm not getting to know the people in this. And because that was my first experience with a monster fucker book, I then made myself read other monster fucker books. And I'm going to admit, I did not have high expectations after that. That grossed me out quite greatly and made me very uncomfortable. But I stumbled across this one, which he's got 4 arms, including these giant wing arms. He's got claws. He's got a freaking tail. He's got horns. He's not a beautiful person. This book should have grossed me out. But frankly, 90% of their page is spent as a couple, getting to know each other, getting to understand each other, and her getting to see the man beneath the monster. And Slaya brought up the point of him turning into a human. The Minotaur does not do that, and neither does this one. It became about finding the humanity within the monster. And I wonder if that's something that they're trying to explore within this genre, and that's the theme, is finding your humanity, and yet somehow it's devolved into Minotaur handjobs. I'm sorry, I don't know how else to say that.
Well, I brought it up because I think the Minotaur one is different from her other books. Her second follow-up was a Mothman that she described as Nebish, which in Yiddish it's basically the Yiddish version of a simp. And so I'm like, wait. So I'm supposed to get romantically interested in a creature that stalks our main character and sits outside her window watching her masturbate, and you describe as a simp, which I know, like, there are people who do go for that. No, this isn't even sensitive. I'm sorry. It's like the worst version of this sort of trope, because I can't understand a sensitive man in a story. This wasn't it. This is a stalker. And so, yeah, I do think the Minotaur one is special, and the rest of her work is not.
I think when you start going into hand jobs and stuff like that, that to me leans towards erotica. Like, if there's no story behind it, that's erotica. Like, I've picked up best-selling authors in books to say, hey, you have to read this book, and I've read it, and it's nothing but sex on the pages. There's no story there. There's no delving into characters. There's a line drawn there where you start getting into that stuff, and it's erotica. I need the story. I don't need to read about hand jobs, I guess.
There is a difference between erotica and romance, especially when it comes to like marketing. And when you're marketing a genre romance book, it is that the romance, the love story itself, drives the plot. And then an erotica story, it doesn't matter if the ending is happy, sad, whatever, but the sex drives the plot.
I agree with Jodie, where if you want like a romance with it has to have a plot. Where you get into erotica, it's purely sex, and then there is the kinky erotica, and that's, I guess the question is, because like this is deviant, but it's technically not kink, but yeah, it really is erotica, and it's not everyone's fetish. And so to paint it like all women are suddenly into this and we're all degenerates because we're reading this harkens back again to 50 Shades of Grey, where some of us are just picking it up to figure out what it is. But yeah, too many hand jobs. Is that really what it is? Oh, I'm not looking forward to this. Is that even literature anymore? That's my question, I guess.
I read the book because the original cover was like somebody with like a latex glove holding like a milk jar or whatever. And like, I come from a family of dairy farmers. So I was like, this is weird, like a erotica of milk. I picked it up, and now I don't like minotaurs personally because, again, family of dairy farmers. I just keep thinking of like going on the farm and seeing the cows.
Anything else around here need milking?
But I thought the story was funny. When I read a book, I don't find the sex stuff like attractive. Like, I don't get turned on by it. I just like look at it and I'm like, that description's funny, or that description's creative. And so I guess I was just kind of surprised by how big it got, but I also surprised by how offended people were by it.
These bitches freaks out here. They display their smut openly in bookstores. They proudly pose in front of their smut collections. They discuss their smut openly on TikTok. They go to smut conventions and get choked out by 9-foot-tall shirtless wendigos.
My favorite thing about smut is that women get to own the narrative for once. And when you read it, you learn about what you want, not what you're just supposed to accept. Smut gives women a language for boundaries, consent, fantasies, pleasure. And the bit that scares insecure men is that it helps women realize they deserve more. Smut itself isn't dangerous, but a woman who knows her worth, that's terrifying.
So as far as the smut is dark romance is just one subcategory of books of romance. And the second lady was acting like it's some kind of instructional way, but not all of it is healthy. These are not guidebooks. And you shouldn't like assume that these are accurate representations of anything.
Definitely not instructional books. I mean, I read to go into another world, to live somebody else's life, or, you know, experience different things. And I might learn a thing or two, but that is not my guidebook to a sex life. I'm sorry. It's not real, people.
Yeah, like the one that always gets me is the some of the positions that they have in these books, where I'm like, okay, how? But also, I did want to say something to your earlier point, Drake, about how clinical the language has started to get. It's actually funny because in this instructional book from the 80s of how to write a romance, she specifically says, and I do agree with this, don't use clinical language. You really need to work on your euphemisms. And I have noticed that is in more modern erotica, even sometimes romance, it starts to get really clinical and verges on using like penis and vagina. I mean, every time I've seen that in a book, I just throw the book across the room because I'm out. I'm totally out. And so like, yeah, in terms of like guidebook, like if I wanted an instruction manual on how to have sex, I would like one that was clinical. And in my romance story, I'm more looking for, even sometimes my erotica too, I'm looking for that feeling of why they are together and what they're doing together. It's not just always the sex.
You mentioned that the guidelines are around marketing is sex driving the story or is romance. And Is there something to the fact that that is so subjective that maybe the market is pushing stuff that is supposed to be erotica or would be normally considered erotica into the romance section just because, frankly, it does sell?
Yeah, and it's not just because it's subjective. So, for example, I wrote a book that I very much consider to be a romance book. It is 100% emotion that drives the story, but there is sex in it. But I submitted it to Draft to Digital, which is, for those that don't know, is a company that submits to multiple distributors. Like it'll submit it to Amazon, it'll distribute to Barnes & Noble. I submitted it to it because I really wanted the book to go to libraries. But I got a warning from them because they decided that it should have been in erotica because of one of the topics of the book. And they said that they were basically going to ban me. So that was rough. So it was really subjective. And another issue was for Amazon, for example, people will submit to categories that are less competitive because if you get to a higher rank in a category, Amazon will give you a bonus. So if you find a category that doesn't have a lot of people in it, and you submit your book to it, you can have a much, much higher chance of getting that monthly bonus. And the bonuses are really good. So let's say your book is space erotica or something, but you find a category that has nobody really submitting to it this month. You submit it to that and it shoots to the top and you've been in first place for 6 months. You know, maybe you've got hundreds or thousands of dollars a month in bonuses, and even despite not selling that much. So people will put them in wrong categories all the time just because of that. Or another thing is people don't want to put their book in erotica categories because you can't have certain types of advertising on Amazon. And also Amazon won't push your book for you. And in some cases, you can't even search up books of certain erotic categories on Amazon. Considering that Amazon is the biggest seller and oftentimes can sell 90% or more of our books on Amazon, people don't want that. So they will purposely avoid putting it into erotica categories, even if their book is erotica.
To me, that romance is about story, right? And erotica is more about the sex. Now, is there a line? Maybe the line is more than 50% all about sex. It's erotica. I don't know.
Modern contemporary romance is not doing it for me anymore is because the characters are allowed to be overly lustful, specifically the men, in their POVs, because it's always dual POV nowadays, that you're almost like, do you even like this girl? Or do you just want to touch her tits? You know what I'm saying? In the romance book community, I feel like we're in a yearning drought right now, where every book is overtly, like, lustful. The writing doesn't feel that deep anymore, and there's no yearning. Like, romance has to have yearning in it. I don't understand how people are getting away with this. But recently, I've been reading more historical romance because I was like, let me go back to my roots. There's a reason why the Bridgerton formula works, okay? And it's honestly because if you really think about it, if you think about a society where the women and men are not allowed to, like, touch each other unless they're married, and they're not allowed to interact really without a chaperone, it almost makes it that when they do interact in a historical romance, like Bridgerton, guys, it is so much more like, oof. Like the writer actually puts in more work to make us feel that these characters are attracted to each other. You know what I'm saying?
Side note, I really hate when people stir things in glass containers on camera. That noise is annoying as shit and it makes me bonkers and it's a pet peeve. Don't do it. With that, anyway, is there a duty within romance to create yearning?
That's what the underlying romance is. And I do not believe or like books that are love at first sight, because I think that it takes time to know a person, and that's what romance is. It's getting to know a person, and leading up to that is what the goal of a romance is.
It's about relationship. And I think a good romance has a lot of different elements that everybody experiences in love. Everybody experiences misunderstandings. Everybody experiences bad timing. And then of course everybody experiences that yearning, but they experience it in different ways. So in my first book, Where There's Smoke, I try to write it from the female's perspective. And in my second book, I'm trying to write it from the male's perspective. Not the same situation, but the continuation of the relationship. And my thought process of doing that is to demonstrate the differences in how romance is experienced from both perspectives. And I'm hoping that I kind of nail that.
I think one of my biggest complaints about a lot of generic commercial romances, the ones where you can tell they've just been churning and burning through the story, is that I always get the sense after the climax, the sexual climax, obviously, that why is the guy still there? Like he got what he wanted because we never got a perspective of anything other than she's hot and I want to sleep with her. Like my favorite romance novelist is probably, like, of the commercial and the big ones, it's probably Mary Barlow, because she does take the time to actually give the heroes a little bit more motivation than just oh, I like her and she's pretty. Some of the absolute worst were just the okay, but this girl's been kind of annoying to you this entire time. Don't tell me you actually like her. And then there's the from the woman's point of view, it's always the, you know, he's gonna cheat on you because he's cheated on every other girl that he's been with. Why are you even pursuing him at all?
What, you don't think all the Playboys just settle down after they find that one girl? What are you talking about? That's in the romance novels. It's my instruction manual.
I write books that have both people that fall in love instantly, you know, because I do have some like fated mate, you know, like aliens or, you know, like stuff like that. But I also have books that people don't fall in love right away. Like the latest one I released, they're locked in the room for 10 years alone and don't even speak to each other. They hate each other so much. They kind of go all over the place. And I like to challenge myself to do something different. The thing is, I write novellas, and to write a novella is its own craft. A lot of times when these people are complaining about books, they're complaining about books that are under like 200 pages or even less. Sometimes these books are under like 100 pages. And they'll be like, where was the yearning and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, girl, do you understand that this person just built a world and a relationship and went from start to finish and, you know, all this stuff in like 80 pages? And then another point I wanted to make on one of the videos you showed was like the cartoon covers and blah, blah, blah. It's because they're cheap to make. You can make them in Canva, and people will pick them up because you can just hold them in public and show them, unlike the clinch covers. Nobody's going to look at you twice. So they sell. And since they're cheap and they sell, publishers put them out. And then there's a lot of like books used to blah, blah, blah. Okay, what books are they talking about? Because when I was like younger and I'd go to like the grocery store, there'd be like racks of paperbacks with like half naked people on them, and like inside they were like really graphic, you know, and our grandmas and moms and everybody were reading these things just out in the open. And there was like no consent by the women on a lot of these, and people just were fine with them. I mean, everybody knew who Fabio was. He was in commercials, for crying out loud. And now all of a sudden people have a problem with it. The yearning is still there when they want to find it. There are hundreds and hundreds of books published every day, and it's there. They're just not looking at it. They're being lazy. They're going by the book talk recommendations. If they want it, it's there. I swear it's there. They just have to look and stop being lazy.
This book had a lot of rules saying that the rape was not actually allowed. So that was some people going off script or being very, very creative with some other stuff. The publishers strictly said, try to keep it consensual, and yet they didn't. So there's a lot to that history.
Conversation, all this research. You know, I wouldn't fault you for still kind of thinking monster fucking is a joke. I mean, however seriously you try to take it, they're still called monster fuckers. It's a word I've been saying for this whole video with a straight face. You'd think it would be a simple idea, but researching this was actually way more daunting than I expected. Being a monster fucker is a deeply personal thing. Like Eliza from The Shape of Water, some people can relate to how the monsters are treated. They see their own otherness mirrored within the monster. For some, it's about empowerment. They want to believe that their love can reform even the most terrifying beasts. Romancing the monster can even be an exercise in self-love, embracing a representation of your own flaws and anxiety, the things that scare you about yourself. As one Redditor put it, if a monster could be beautiful to someone, then I could be too. There are as many reasons to be a monster fucker as there are monsters to love. Ella, the researcher I interviewed, left me with this thought. There's so much flexibility in monstrosity. It's a lack of categorization and boundaries. It can be extremely helpful when engaging with desire. And I think she's right. I think there's a reason this caught on and a reason it stayed here. I think as an exercise, it's just legitimately useful. If you really want to figure out your own boundaries, to determine who the monsters are to you rather than be told by someone else, well, maybe the monster fuckers are onto something.
I don't know about anybody else, but I'm going into 2026 continuing to read my silly little romance books and not giving a flying fuck what anybody thinks about it. Yeah, in an age where literacy is dying, I'm going to continue reading as much and whatever the hell I would like. It's quite literally the only thing keeping me sane, and I'm holding on by a thread.
Using the word smut or smutty as a dismissive or derogatory term is yet another way to belittle and diminish women's storytelling, but it also overlooks the massive cultural and economical impact of open door romance. You only have to look at the success of Heated Rivalry to see that audiences are crying out for these kinds of stories, and they are capable of generating billions of dollars of revenue for the global economy. Language from romance is also permeating culture, particularly for Gen Z, so you hear a lot about golden retriever boyfriends and black cat women. That's coming from romance. Belittle the romance genre all you like, but these readers are passionate, intelligent, and very, very committed to their world. Get on the train or get off the track.
I enjoy the occasional erotica and smut novel every now and again, but I think it is better to err on the side of romance, and it shows in most of the best-selling romantic stories usually do not have explicit sex scenes at all. Thinking Nicholas Sparks, Twilight, 50 Shades of Grey is a fluke, but yeah, like really, really highly successful, long-lasting too, are usually ones that don't have explicit, just implied.
I don't think it's important. I said it in the beginning. It's the story and what the story drives. And I don't think you absolutely have to have the smut in there to have a good story. But if you do, it just needs to be written well. And I think that's where some of these books out there are maybe bestsellers, but shouldn't be because they're not exactly well written smut.
Does it have an impact? Yes. Would the world move on without it? We are. Like, there are cultures that don't have it that do just fine. The story is what's important, and it's just like any other, plot device.
I don't think it's important. I think it's lazy. I think it's kids with markers drawing on the bathroom door.
Okay, no, I gotta say something.
I knew that was coming.
I include it in there because it is a reality. My book characters have sex. What is it? But I guess then again, if we're talking about our different definitions of what smut is, then for me, just saying smut just means books with sex. And since I write books that are in the romance category that contain sex, they have been referred to as smut. And so I would assume that you're referring to books like mine. A lot of it, the sex in my books are for creative or convenient, comedic, because since I write stuff like sentient object romance, part of it is figuring out how a creature like that could do that, because it's funny to me.
All I remember is you telling me about your bubble tea romance.
Right. And so to me it's funny, and to make that surprise and along with the romance, it's like a fairy tale.
I wasn't talking about sex in a book. I was talking about smut. If we go back to our discussion, I'm talking about the deviant behavior. This isn't my expertise, but this is my opinion. When it's over the top, that's smut to me. Is only done to gain attention.
So you're talking about the stuff that I said makes me question freedom of speech.
I didn't say you can't write it. I didn't say you can't do it. I said it seems lazy to me. It's a lot harder to write, Shakespeare than it is to write
Penis and vagina.
Roses are red, violets are blue.
Has this conversation kind of made you think about this in any different terms, Or what are some questions you're kind of walking away thinking about that you maybe want the audience to answer in the comments?
I'm thinking I want to read Sylvia's books. I don't have a difference of opinion. I think it's subjective, just like music and movies. It's all in what you want to read, and readers sometimes pick on other readers for their choice of what they like to read, but tough shit. I'm gonna read what I want to read.
I will say that if you read my books, don't expect Shakespeare. They're more like deep fried Oreos. Like, they're very much not for everyone, and might only want a bite of, even if you do want it. No, I really enjoyed this, and I like talking to people with different opinions, and I even like arguing with people. And my opinion on the other cuckoo bananas people is that they're still fucking morons.
I mean, it hasn't really changed my opinion per se. I would like to add, because this never got brought up, but Fanny Price and Moll Flanders exists from the 1600s, so none of this is new. It's just the language that we use is new, and sometimes people forget that. Like, if you can parse through it, some of those scenes are very, very spicy. I think it's not so much that it's there. I think sex is always going to be in stories in one form or another. It's just, can we get better writing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think my perspective has really changed much as far as for me and for my wife and for the audience that I cater to. It's going to be, very sweet romance. But again, I'm not going to shame somebody because they write that or they want to read it. I mean, but as far as for me and for my genre, that's just not where I'm going.
All right, everybody, thank you so much for your time. If we could all go around and let everyone know what it is we write and what our thoughts on smut are just in general. I'm horror and fantasy author E.H. Drake, host of the E.H. Drake podcast, and my general opinion of smut is it's like any art. It's an extension of our reality showing in art, and sometimes it can be done in interesting, even creative ways, but sometimes it can be used as a crutch.
So I'm Slaya Nemoy. I write all sorts of things. My current book that's out is To Private Ford Rayburn. It just came out this fall, and I'm working on the sequel to that. My general opinion on smut is I would rather it be literary, but I do appreciate a good erotic story every now and again.
I'm Jodie Leigh. I write romantic suspense and historical romance. I currently have 5 books out, and I'm working on my 6th, hopefully to be out in May. My general opinion of smut is if the story warrants it, then go for it. To each their own.
Sylvia Morrow is my name. Well, I'm best known for sentient object romance, but I write paranormal, monster, horror romance, soon release just straight up horror, no romance. Basically everything. And my general opinion of smut is that I don't really care what people do, so whatever. I like it. I prefer it to be part of a love story, as like romance is the most important part to me, but yeah, do whatever, I don't care.
My name is Rees Walther. I have written my first romance novel this last year. I wrote it as an anniversary gift for my wife. And my general opinion of smut, I don't really care either way, whatever you'd like. But that's not the genre that I do. I do more of a sweet romance because that's what my wife loves.
At the end of the day, this topic is extremely personal because sex is personal. So I'd like your thoughts down below. All the links for these wonderful authors who gave us their time will be there as well, so please make sure to check them out. Thank you so much for joining us, and happy writing.